The mysteries of the ocean are quite incredible. In fact, we know more about some areas of space than we even do about the depths of the ocean. In this box, we get to study creatures that live under the sea. I'm Lisa, and this is BioBox Labs. In this particular video, I want to show you two of the most complex experiments that you're going to do in your box. One is to take a close look at a sea star. Now I call it a sea star because it's not really a starfish. It's not a fish at all. In fact, seahorses are more fish than sea stars are. So you're going to get a chance to look at the particular structures found in a sea star. Then we will take a really close look, both externally and internally, at squid. And we're going to get to dissect those and look at all the incredible features found within a squid. That is what we get to do today. Here we have our sea stars. We have two of them, so you can see how they come in a variety of sizes. In fact, if you've seen the introduction, you saw a view of all the organisms we saw at the aquarium, and there we saw a number of sea stars that came in a whole bunch of colors. We tend to think of them more often as this orange color, but because they're preserved, they're not as bright orange as what they would maybe be if they were in the ocean. So the first thing you'll notice when you see them is that sea stars are known for their spiny skin. Look at all these little spines sticking out. So they basically have their skeleton coming out of their skin. They're known for having spiny skin. So it's soft underneath with these little spines sticking up from them. What you also notice is that they do not have a particular head region. If you look around, you can't see any visible head. In fact, these arms that they have are all arranged around the center here. And so there is no particular head region. So sea stars are not exactly smart. The next thing you'll notice is that they have arms projecting out. How many arms can you see here? There are 5 on each of these sea stars. And many sea stars come with 5 arms, but all the rest of them come in multiples of 5. So sea stars come with 10 or 15. Some have 20. There are even some sea stars that are known to have up to 40 arms. Incredible. Sticking out in all different locations. So always in multiples of 5. So when you look at these, the interesting thing is that sea stars have a really unique ability. If one of their arms gets severed or cut off, they can actually regrow one of the arms back. They can regenerate what they call their arm. So these actually have all been intact because you can tell that they're all the same length, so they must have started growing all at the same time. The next thing that you'll notice is the interesting things are on their side here. We call this the oral side because it's the side where the mouth is located. If you look at right here, this opening, that is the mouth. And if you look deep inside, you can actually see that there's a soft tissue in there, and that's actually the stomach. So when sea stars want to eat, they're actually carnivores. They will surround their food like a clam, and they'll stick on the clam and pull it apart, and then they stick their mouth, and their stomach will actually come out of their mouth and surround the clam and actually eat it up outside of their body. And then once it's digested, it pulls all the nutrients back in. Super amazing. So that's the mouth, and then the stomach's there. The other thing which sea stars are known for are these little structures down the middle here. These are called tube feet. They're little suction cups. And those little suction cups are what can grab hold and pry open a clam. So these suction cups are opened and closed, or basically stuck and unstuck, because of a water system that goes through like with pipes, kind of like the pipes in your house for your plumbing system. But all the water comes in from one location. And I bet if you turn your sea stars over, you'll be able to find there's kind of off center, a little white structure here. It's called a sieve plate. And this basically is where all the water comes into the sea star, then filters into all the different tubes that eventually cause these tube feet to be able to be suction cups. So it's pretty cool that way. The last thing that you might want to notice is that there's no detectable eyes. They don't have a head, so they don't have an eye there. But in fact, their eyes are located at the tips of each of the arms. Each one of them has a tiny little eye spot, too small to see on this video, but if you take your magnifying glass, you can actually look at it more closely and you'll be able to detect a tiny spot at the tip of any one of these arms. And generally, one arm tends to be the dominant arm and it tends to lead in that direction. Their eyes are not like ours in that we can detect images. Instead, they mostly help them see light and dark, and some maybe larger images to protect them from various predators. So sea stars, you can see, are very fascinating creatures. In this experiment, we're simply looking at the external features. If you are interested in doing an internal dissection, you may as well. And there's lots of great videos online if you want to see any more details about the internal structures. But they often tend to be tiny and are more difficult to see. Most of what you will see internally are the stomach, and then ultimately you can see some of their digestive glands and maybe some of their reproductive glands, but they're not real complex inside. So we just wanted to stick with the most fascinating features, which are on the external features. So that is our sea star. Now we get to dissect a squid. These organisms are incredibly interesting. The one we have here is rather small squid, but some of them can be really tiny. They can even be smaller than your thumb. The largest squid known to man has been recorded at being 50 feet long. Huge. I would not want to run into one of those in the ocean. But these are incredibly interesting organisms. So what do we have here? If we look at it, I've laid the squid in a sense on its stomach, which is what we call the ventral side, and this side is really its back. And one way you can tell is because these two structures here, which are called the fins, spread out. Now sometimes when you get a squid, maybe the one that came in your box will be preserved kind of different, so maybe it comes in sideways and you have to actually open up the fins. But once you open up the fins, you can tell which direction is its back. So the fins are here. The other things that are super understandable about squid are these arms. Now, so often we just call all of these tentacles, but really there are only two tentacles. You can see that these two are much longer than the other ones. So these two are the tentacles, and they have all these little suction cups on it, similar to the sea star, but they're a little different the way they swell and stick onto things. And these other 8 here that look like tentacles are actually their arms. So there are 8 arms and 2 tentacles, so 10 structures all together, all of which have these suction cups, so they also can grab food, hold on to it, break it apart, and suck things into their mouth. So those are the structures. Now, one thing you'll see that's really different than a sea star is that squid actually have a head. And they refer to these sometimes as a cephalopod, which means they have a head and their foot is kind of connected to it. So this would be considered their feet, or really arms coming out of their feet, and then the head. So they do actually have a head, unlike a sea star. And they actually have a brain in there and they have the ability to detect things much more. So they're much smarter organisms than sea stars. The other thing you'll see here is this big flat structure. And it's kind of like a big thing that wrapped all the way around. So you can see the back side. So it's almost like this big tube around the whole body of the squid. That is referred to as the mantle. So the mantle actually normally is rounded. This one's preserved, so it's a little flatter, but it's like that. And you can actually almost look inside and peek all the way inside of this squid. So the mantle here, the other thing you'll notice is on the outside of the mantle, there are tiny little dots that are like brown dots. Those are filled with pigment, they're like pigment cells, and those are the things that help a squid actually change colors. And in the beginning of this video, you saw the octopus that actually changed from dark to light, that camouflaged into the rock next to it. Squid have the similar ability. They can actually camouflage themselves or change their colors because of these little pigment cells on the edge. So those are super interesting. The other thing you'll see are these eye spots right here. They have 2 eyes, and later on, if you want, we can dissect them out. They have a lens somewhat similar to a human lens. It's a little different. They see quite detailed structures, and so those are through their eye spots. And the last distinguishing feature is this tube right here. It's kind of squished, but you can see there's an opening right here, and this tube goes down into where the mantle is, and that is referred to as the siphon, and it's like a funnel, and it actually sucks water in, it holds it into the mantle, and then when it's ready to move, it shoots it out the funnel and it makes it move in this direction, so away from the tentacles. So it's basically moves by jet propulsion. And the movement is so incredible that scientists are studying it to see if they can actually discover more about ways to improve our submarines and other kind of ocean vessels. So it's an incredible type of movement. They can move really fast through the ocean. So those are each of the external features of our squid. Now we're going to take a look at some of the internal structures of this squid. And we're going to start by finding its mouth. So just like a sea star, the mouth is actually inside the middle of each of the arms. So if I pull these back, you'll see a bulging section right here. And this is actually the mouth. And I can go inside here, and you'll find if you use your forceps that you have, when you go into there, you can feel that there's something hard in there. And that's actually something called a beak. And I can grab hold of it, and I can actually pull this beak out. It's similar to a beak on a bird, and they are hard and like teeth-like structures that are inside there. And there is the piece of the beak. You see how it's so hard like this, and it has a tip on it that actually allows them to grab hold of their prey and actually chew them up. And I can actually pull the other side out here, and there's the rest of the beak. Look how huge that is. So they can chomp up their prey. So that is inside of their mouth. So now we're going to begin the dissection to the inside of the squid. We're going to start by, if we're looking on this, again, we're on the back side, and we're going to snip down inside the mantle. So we want to hold it up closely, and I'm going to turn my scissors so that the sharp side is on the bottom and the blunt side is on top. Now I'm going to flip the squid around so I can make the incision, and we're going to hold the mantle up a little bit here because we don't want to get any of the structures that are internally. And I'm going to slowly snip carefully down the mantle, and you can see it's almost hollow inside, but there are some interesting structures inside of here. Snip down. Now I'm going to take these pins, which you should have in your box, and we're going to use them to hold this open. Already you can see one of the defining features of a squid, something that's really unique that most other organisms do not have. See how it's black in there, and there's almost like an ink spot, and that's because something called the ink sac, and some of the ink has actually leaked out. And if you look here, there's a tube right down the center here. This tube right here is filled with ink, and they use that to scare off predators. They can squirt them in the face. So you can see that this tube of ink empties right into where the siphon is, and so they can squirt it out the siphon, same place where water squirts out, and basically the siphon is the exit point of everything from inside. So it squirts out ink, it squirts out water, squirts out waste, all of that comes out through the siphon. So the ink comes out and it sprays a predator in their face, and then they can't really see. So that's the ink that's right here. Another feature that you'll see are these two kind of feathery structures coming up from the posterior side, the tail of the squid. And if you look at these features here. These are the gills. So because they live in water, they can't breathe, they don't have lungs. They pull in water, and they can filter oxygen and carbon dioxide and such through their gills to actually excrete waste and grab in oxygen from the water. So that's the gills that are here. And then we will also see this bulging here is part of the intestines underneath here. In fact, the waste from the intestine empties out through the siphon. And then we'll see some other structures down here. And these are like reproductive glands and also the heart. So actually, squid have 3 hearts that are in this region down here. And they send, one of the hearts is just responsible for pushing blood into the gills and so forth. This looks like this. I can't tell. I think this is a female, but I'm not altogether sure. So all their reproductive structures are down here. So the last thing that is super interesting about the internal structures is this long thing that you'll see in the back that travels all the way down the front side. Actually, it's almost like what we would call our stomach, the underneath side of the squid. And if I move this away, you can see that it goes all the way up. See this dark structure? That's what we call the pen. And it is basically like their backbone. It's hard. I think it's made out of calcium. It's kind of almost like a bone in a sense. And you'll find that you can pull it there. And they refer to it as a pen because oftentimes, now this one broke, but you can actually pull the whole thing out. Mine's coming out in pieces, but you can pull the structure out, and some people can actually even write with it. So people have used it maybe in primitive days or times long ago. They could use this for a pen, and they could dip it in the ink from the ink sac and use it to write or draw or whatever they needed. So this pen is coming out in lots of different pieces, but you can see it's a really hard structure. It gives the squid some support, and so it's not just for us to write with, obviously, but it's actually something that's beneficial to the squid in their structure as well, just like our backbone is for us. Thank you so much for joining us today at BioBox Labs as we have discovered the organisms that live under the sea, as we've looked at this squid here and at the sea stars and the other experiments that you were able to do from your BioBox. Make sure you do extra experiments if you want. Feel free to poke around and look inside, ask questions. This is your chance to discover more about these amazing living creatures. We also can use your magnifying glass or any other tools from past experiments, boxes that you might have. So thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, let us know at info@bioboxlabs.com. Also send photos, pictures to Facebook and Instagram. We'd love to hear your stories.